You're listening to The Tom Daniel Show, and I'm your host, Tom Daniel. When people talk about the history of American music, they almost always picture a stage, spotlight, a performer separated from an audience by footlights and distance, and we imagine these grand spaces designed for reverence and applause, and yeah, those places do matter, but they actually come kind of late in the story. Because Southern music didn't begin on stages. It didn't begin in concert halls, and it certainly didn't begin with people sitting quietly in rows and behaving themselves. No, Southern music began at home, and more specifically, it began on front porches. I can't even remember how many outdoor festivals my wife and I have attended where the performance stage was shaped like a front porch. For most of Southern history, music was not something you went to. It was something that happened where you already were. You didn't buy a ticket. You didn't dress up. You didn't applaud politely at the end. You just leaned back in a chair, balanced it on two legs and listened while the locusts and frogs kept time. The front porch was one of the most important cultural spaces in the South for generations. It wasn't just architectural, it was social, a threshold space, not fully private, not fully public. The front porch was a place where neighbors stopped by without invitation, where family gathered without planning, where music lived comfortably without being announced. Music that grows in those conditions behaves differently. Porches also had something going for them: acoustics. Wooden floors reflect sound. Overhanging roofs provide gentle resonance. Open air prevents buildup and distortion. A fiddle, a banjo, or a guitar doesn't need amplification on a front porch. It just needs space. And the porch gave Southern musicians exactly that: an informal, forgiving soundstage where precision mattered less than presence. Nobody was really trying to impress anybody on the porch. Well, wait a minute. That's not entirely accurate. A lot of musicians absolutely were showing off. It's just that the cultural norm didn't require it. So what I should say is that nobody was primarily trying to impress anyone. And that's the important point. Southern porch music wasn't about virtuosity. It was about participation. Man, as long as you could play 3 chords, you were welcome. If you could sing harmony, any harmony, you were needed. If you couldn't sing at all, if you could just keep time with your foot, clap, or just sit and listen, that was also considered contributing. There was no audience because everybody present was part of the event. That single fact explains more about Southern music than almost any genre label ever could. Is the front porch a Southern thing? There's an observation I once heard on a television program, and I can't remember which one, and it stuck with me. At the time, it sounded almost too neat to be true. The claim was that American culture, and especially Southern culture, is unusual in global history because of the front porch, not just as an architectural feature, but as a lived-in cultural space. Now, at first that sounds exaggerated. After all, plenty of cultures around the world have got outdoor living spaces. There are courtyards, patios, balconies, verandas. There are thresholds between inside and outside, and those are nothing new. But see, here's the distinction that matters. In most cultures, those spaces are secondary. They're seasonal. They're private. They're decorative. Or they're functionally separate from the street and the community. In the traditional American South, the front porch was different. It faced the street. It was elevated. It was used daily. And it wasn't an option. The porch wasn't just attached to the house. It was the house's public voice. It was where you were seen, where you were greeted, where passerbys saw you, where neighbors stopped without knocking, where news traveled, where children learned how adults talked, and where music happened without needing to ask anybody for permission. Architectural historians have pointed out that, at scale, the South treated the porch not as an accessory, but as a primary living space. It functioned as a social room that just happened to be outdoors. That combination, visibility, regular use, social expectation, and cultural function, is unusually rare worldwide. Other cultures had thresholds, but the South built a way of life on one. And when you understand that, a lot of Southern music suddenly makes more sense. It wasn't written for privacy. It wasn't written for distance. It was written to travel across the yard, down the street, and into other people's porches and evenings. That's not accidental. That's architecture shaping culture. And when we talk about blues, country, gospel, old time, bluegrass, we tend to categorize them by style. But what they really share is origin. They all grew up in spaces where the line between performer and listener did not exist. On a porch, the song doesn't stop because somebody messed up. It just keeps on going. I mean, somebody laughs, somebody will correct them, somebody comes in late on the chorus. The music adapts to the people, not the other way around. And that flexibility shaped the sound of Southern music. Southern songs repeat because people come and go. Verses stretch because conversation happens right in the middle of the song. Tempos breathe because nobody's playing to any kind of metronome. This is also why Southern music tells stories so well. Porch music isn't in a hurry. You're not racing toward the ending. You're sitting with it, embracing it, enjoying it, letting it unfold in real time, the way stories unfold when nobody needs them to be cut short. One of the clearest, popular images of this older musical reality doesn't come from folklore archives, field recordings, or academic collections. Now, it comes from TV. Specifically, Sheriff Andy Taylor sitting on the front porch in the evening with his guitar. The guitar rests across his lap. It's not positioned. It's not staged. It's just there. Aunt Bee is occupied nearby, hands busy with something domestic that doesn't stop simply because the music starts. Opie listens closely enough to feel included, but not put on the spot. Barney drifts in and out of half sleep in a rocking chair, supplying an occasional high harmony when the moment invites it. Nothing about that scene is presented as a performance. Nobody applauds. Nobody hushes the room. Nobody says, "Gee, Andy, you really ought to take this to Nashville." No, the music exists simply because the people are there. Andy doesn't announce a song or prepare the space. He strums because the evening allows it. His playing is competent but not showy. It's rhythmically steady, harmonically simple, socially grounded. They're songs everybody knows. Aunt Bee doesn't stop what she's doing to listen. No, she stays present in her work, which is itself a form of listening. Opie learns through proximity rather than through instruction. He absorbs the timing, the tone, and the restraint the way children have always done, by being near it long enough for it to feel normal. What matters about this scene the most is that it's not nostalgia. It's the musical ethic of Southern music that it models. Music is not treated as an interruption or an event. It's not framed as some sort of special, elevated form of life. No, it's simply part of the house. Andy's not performing for Aunt Bee and Opie so much as with them. Even though he's the only one holding an instrument and singing, the boundary between musician and listener dissolves into shared time and shared space. That is front porch Southern music in its purest form. And the porch itself reinforces the idea. It faces outward toward this town and the street, but it remains intimate. The sound would still carry if someone happened to be passing by, and that possibility is accepted without ever being exploited. The music is just allowed to drift. It belongs to whoever happens to hear it, including nobody if nobody walks by. In that sense, Andy Taylor represents a distilled version of how Southern music functions. It wasn't reserved for stages or special occasions or for the radio. It lived in the margins of the day, after supper, before dark. While hands were busy, nobody needed anything to happen. The guitar on the porch is not a symbol of virtuosity so much as continuity of life. It signals that nothing urgent needs to come next. Television rarely captures cultural truth by accident, but this image endured because it resonated with lived memory. Viewers recognized the posture, the sound, and the social arrangement immediately. Non-Southerners were drawn to it without ridicule. Andy's porch felt familiar, even to people who had never lived anywhere like Mayberry. It looked like home, and more importantly, it sounded like the way music once belonged there. You're listening to The Tom Daniels Show. We'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, The Tom Daniels Show? What are you waiting for, The Tom Daniels Show? What are you waiting for, The Tom Daniels Show?
And welcome back to The Tom Daniels Show, where Mary Mac has clearly been outside jamming on the front porch. Mary Mac is the world's most perfect band. We've been talking about the role of the front porch in the development of Southern music, but I also need to acknowledge some other outdoor spaces that served this same purpose. Church steps. Now, the front porch wasn't the only place this kind of music happened. It was simply the most common. Another crucial space was the church steps. Inside the church, music followed rules. Hymns were selected. Keys were chosen. Words mattered deeply. Inside the sanctuary, music was sacred and intentional. But outside the church, on the steps, under trees, beside the building, music loosened its tie. People lingered after services. Somebody would start humming. Somebody else found a harmony. Children played. Adults talked. And songs drifted between sacred and secular easily. This is where gospel music learned how to swing. Church step music kept the communal structure of worship, but shed the formality. Call and response still thrived there. Improvisation flourished. Tempo adjusted itself to the people singing instead of the people leading. The church steps functioned like a porch with a theological accent. And once again, there was no audience. Everybody was a participant. Work-labor camps. Another overlooked musical space was the work camp. Railroad crews, timber camps, turpentine camps, road gangs, farm labor crews. These weren't places of leisure, definitely, but music still lived there anyway, but because it had to. Work songs were functional. They regulated movement. They synchronized effort. They reduced fatigue. But they also did something else. They turned labor into a shared experience. Call and response wasn't decoration there. It was structural. The leader sang to set the pace. The group responded to confirm cohesion. Lyrics were improvised because conditions changed. Humor crept in. Complaints surfaced. Stories emerged. Now, this music wasn't written to be preserved. It was written to get through the day. But its influence is everywhere. You find it in blues phrasing, in gospel rhythm, in country storytelling. Even rock and roll's sense of drive owes something to the music that learned how to keep people moving together. Once again, there was no stage, just people, work, and sound. And how about juke joints? If the front porch was music at home and the church steps were music in transition, the juke joint was music after hours. Juke joints were informal, often improvised spaces, converted buildings, back rooms, standalone shacks, where music happened without institutional oversight. They weren't built for prestige. They were built for release. And musically, they functioned like indoor porches. No separation between performer and crowd in a juke joint. People talked back to the music. They danced right up next to the performer. They requested songs. They interrupted the performer. They participated in the songs. Blues didn't just play in juke joints, it learned there. Timing adjusted to dancing feet. Volume adjusted to the room size. Lyrics adjusted to who was listening. If a song didn't connect, it didn't survive the night. That feedback loop sharpened the music. It rewarded honesty over polish. It favored feel over perfection. And once again, Southern music was being shaped by proximity between the performer and everybody else. Now, why do these spaces matter more than an actual performance venue? Now, what all of these spaces share, front porches, church steps, work camps, juke joints, it's not architecture. It's social structure. They're all small scale, participatory, informal, and definitely responsive. They require music to adapt to people instead of demanding that people adapt to the music. That condition shaped everything that followed in Southern music. When Southern music eventually moved onto the stages, it carried with it these same habits. On-stage performers talk to the audiences. They told stories between songs. They invite call and response with the audience. They treat silence and sound as shared property. Even today, when Southern musicians perform on the largest stages imaginable, they often sound like they're still playing for people sitting close enough to talk back. And when those walls do go up, when the music becomes sealed, distant, untouchable, it loses something essential. Because Southern music was never meant to be admired from afar. It was meant to be shared up close. Now, eventually the culture shifted. Industrialization pulled people off farms. Air conditioning pulled people indoors. Cars replaced walking. Radios replaced neighbors. Music became something you consumed instead of something you made. But radio didn't erase the porch so much as translate some of its values into a new medium. Early Southern radio sounded like a porch because that's what it was trying to recreate. Live performances, loose structure, familiar voices, mistakes were left intact. Programs that felt communal instead of polished. Even when you were alone in your house, the radio tried to make it feel like other people were right there with you. And that's not an accident. That was cultural memory at work. At some point in American history, we quietly began confusing two very different things, music and the music business. Those two things are not synonyms. Music is what happens when people gather and sound fills the space between them. The music business is what happens when somebody figures out how to make a buck out of that. Those two realities can overlap. They often do. But they're not born from the same instinct. Southern culture has always been more aligned naturally with music than the music business. And that distinction is important because the front porch didn't exist to develop talent. The church steps didn't function as audition rooms. The work camp was not a publishing house. People sang because they were there, because the evening was long, because the job was hard, because the hymn needed carrying, because the story needed telling, and the motivating factor in all of that was never profit. It was expression. It was participation. It was survival. It was memory. And now here's the great irony of all that. Almost every major American genre that later became commercialized, like blues, jazz, country, gospel, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, all emerged from Southern soil. They were born on front porches, sanctuaries, fields, juke joints, river towns, street corners. They weren't engineered in corporate boardrooms. They weren't assembled by market analysis. They were not focus grouped. They were lived. Only later did somebody realize, hey, I can make a buck off this. Tin Pan Alley, publishing houses, record labels, distribution networks, radio syndicates, booking circuits, those structures did not invent the music. They just found it. And once they found it, they refined it, branded it, amplified it, made a buck off of it. Now, that's not an accusation. That's just simply how economics works. But the cultural impulse behind the music was different. Southerners make music the same way we cook, or pray, or tell stories. It's a habit. It's a reflex. It's embedded. Man, if you put 5 Southerners in a room long enough, somebody's going to start humming or singing. If there's a guitar nearby, somebody's going to pick it up and play. And if there's not a guitar, somebody's going to tap out a rhythm on the table. Our instinct is towards sound. Other regions, particularly the commercial centers of the Northeast, they excel at building the machinery around that sound. Contracts, royalties, distribution, promotion, copyright, scale, studios, mixing boards. One culture could not stop making music, and the other culture could not stop figuring out how to make a buck off of it. Again, I'm not talking about villainy or anything. It's just specialization. But the difference explains something essential about Southern music. Its origin point was never the marketplace. That's why so many Southern songs feel close, conversational, and unpolished even after they become famous. They carry the memory of the porch. They still sound like they expect somebody to join in and sing along. They resist complete distance. The business can amplify Southern music, it can globalize it, it can turn it into a billion-dollar industry. But the business did not create the impulse that made the music in the first place. That impulse was older, slower, and not concerned with profit. It was concerned with being heard by people sitting close enough to answer back. Now, if you want to understand Southern music, don't start with charts or concert halls. Start with a porch at dark, a set of church steps after Sunday service, a work crew keeping time, a juke joint humming late into the night. Start with places where music functioned as shared property among those present. That's where the sound really came from. And in a lot of ways, it never really left. This has been the Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening, keep learning.
From your usual routine and tune into the Tom Daniels Show. You'll discover the world of melodies and stories that you might not know. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Show. Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show.